Hello students, welcome to HTML and CSS Part 1. So your learning outcomes for this week, you're going to list fundamental HTML tags found in modern web pages. You contrast the purpose and importance of HTML versus that of CSS. You'll be able to describe the box model and understand variability from browser to browser. We'll use various CSS selectors to change the look of the web page. And we'll start to build our example website, including example images. So before our great journey into the world of HTML and CSS coding, let's review exactly what is in a web page anyway. I talked about this last week a bit. Let's review. A web page contains content, styling, and interaction. Content is where HTML comes in. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So HTML works by categorizing pieces of content or tagging content so the browser can present it on a web page properly. For example, a paragraph of text will get tagged with a P. And this is what it looks like. Hello world is written as this P, hello world, and then a P again in HTML. Let's break this down a little further. So you notice the tags at the beginning at the end, where it has the little P and some stuff here, and P and some stuff here. Those are the tags. The opening tag has a left arrow bracket, then the P, and then a right arrow bracket. The closing tag is the same left arrow bracket, and then a forward slash, and then the P, and then a right arrow bracket. So what it's telling the browser is, hey browser, here's a paragraph, here's where it starts, and here's where it ends. And what we've done is marked up this text, hence the term hypertext markup language. You'll see plenty more examples of these markups, but for links, lists, images, navigation, and more. So I want to take a quick sidebar into something called HTML5. HTML5 is the latest and greatest spec of hypertext markup language. Back in the days before HTML5, we'd have HTML4 and something called transitional X HTML. They're both old and busted now, so we want to use HTML5. HTML5 is great because you can use your words, and I'll explain what that means in a second. What it means is HTML5 is semantic. That is to say that we have things like head, body, footer, section, link, and they're actual words, not weird little pieces of code that's not English or common words. These are common words that will describe what that piece of HTML does. That's the end of the sidebar. So now we go into styling. We have something called a cascading style sheet, also known as CSS, and I'll be referring to it as CSS going forward. This is where we apply style to content, colors, fonts, positioning, and lots more. Why is it called cascading? Well, this requires another explanation. There's a hierarchy when it comes to style, and think of a waterfall. At the top of the falls is something called inline style, which is often included within the body of the HTML, and this will be more clear when we actually get into the code. But for now, think of at the top of the falls as inline style, right embedded within the HTML itself, and within the content, say a paragraph that we just looked at. Somewhere in the middle of the falls is the internal CSS in the head of the HTML, and I'll show you where that lives in a second, in the next video. But somewhere in the middle of the falls is internal CSS. And at the bottom of the falls is external CSS. This is CSS completely located outside of the HTML, a separate file, not even included in the HTML. At the bottom is where we want to be, at least for where you place your CSS. And this will become more clear. I will demonstrate this later. Why is this important? Well, the browser looks for styling instructions at the top of the falls first. Then the browser checks the next level and then the next. And the higher overrules the lower. And again, I will demo this shortly. Generally, CSS outside of the actual HTML body code, that is to say, at the bottom of the falls, is easier to maintain overall. Now, once we have content and styling, we go to interaction. And JavaScript is the main way we create interaction on websites. JavaScript, boiled down, is if and then statements. In plain language, if someone clicks on this link or does any number of actions, then something happens. We'll return to this later this semester, of course. Now we're going to concentrate on content and styling. And the first concept I want to go through first is something called the box model. Each HTML element is a box. So a paragraph is really a box. Everything else we talked about or we'll talk about is a box. And every box of content has a width, a height, something called padding, and something called a border. And we'll go beyond this a little bit and say that they have a margin as well, which is the space outside the border. Again, content has width and height. It also has a border, and then the space in between the actual content and this border is called padding. And outside the border, not shown here, but outside the border is something called margin. I'll demonstrate this more in the next video. So in the next video, we'll talk about actually writing HTML code and CSS code. Hello, students. Welcome to HTML and CSS Part 1.